Okay, you were getting at it.
Oh. Jeremy, you're up. And guys, so we want to have foreign economic meetings and since you got one.
Okay, so this is something that we were doing pretty well last year, and then things just happened, and so at the beginning of the year we were trying to get it started up again, and then a thing called a pandemic happened. So now we're able to try to start getting back together, and hopefully we can get into the routine of being here monthly. We would love to do that. We've always found it helpful before. So thanks for having us, especially on a busy day and an off normal meeting day. So I thought what we could do is go through, there was a list of three priority topics that Donna had sent out yesterday. And we could go through each one, and you tell me if you want to spend more time or less time on anything with each one of those topics, and then we can talk about whatever else that we want to get to. So the first one is related to our existing contract, economic development contract between the LDC and the county. And taking a look at the deliverables that were listed originally in the contract and the status of those, and then talking about some of the priorities we want to have the remainder of this year, but also starting to think about 2021 because it is August. So I thought what we could do is just go through that list and have a quick discussion or update on each item. And I asked Russ to come because Russ is the one who's overseeing a lot of those, and if you have any really detailed questions, he's the guy to talk to, not me. So number one on that list was the microenterprise grant program that was applied for it's probably applied for in 2016. 17, and was $200,000. That is from a looking at effort required moving forward. That is just about done. During this calendar year, there's been no awarding of the projects were all given their grants last year. And since then, it's been the reporting and administration in order to get the reimbursements. So if for all of our benefits, remember how this works, is that this grant was awarded to the county. So it wasn't awarded to the LDC. It was awarded to the county when Russ worked for the county. And when we made the merger a year and a half ago now?
19.
We did a sub-recipient agreement, which basically means the county's turning over the entire thing to the LDC, and then we would be in charge of actually paying out the money and all that kind of stuff, which is what we did. So, but now Russ has finally submitted. There's been a lot of. It's a administrative matter. But we have all of the documentation in place, so that the next step is that the state will reimburse, will pay the county, and then the county will basically invoice the county, and then the county pays LDC.
So Jeremy, this is federal money that goes through the state for the microenterprise grant.
Right, see, community development block grants.
Okay, and you would anticipate that in the next 6 months, there might be another community block grant from the federal, potentially.
Right, so thanks for that segue. So if you have any specific questions about this existing one, we can talk about it.
I'd just like to know how did everybody that did the grant, did they all get the money they were gonna get? Did they do what they were expecting to do? Everything worked out well, or?
Yes, yeah, all the projects completed their objectives. The reason there was a delay in the extension was requested by the state actually instructed us to apply for an extension because there was one grantee that had planned to do hiring in the fall, but it was a bakery in Saranac Lake, and the construction of the bakery got delayed. And so their hiring got delayed by a few months, but they completed that in March. So we were able to submit the final status report. And then
How many jobs were created?
how many jobs were created? I think there was 3 or 4. But we helped a lot of
For all
low to
of-
moderate existing owners, which also count. It's not job creation, but that does count if you're a low to moderate income owner as well.
But it can be job creation or retention, or you have a low to moderate income property or business owner. And if the low to moderate income business owner, that also counts as an eligible project, which is what a lot of them
Right.
How many projects were there?
I think we received interest from 20 different businesses, and we awarded 7.
Yeah, and I see the list of the 7 that were awarded. The only thing, and I hate to make it another southern thing, but I think on the southern end, the people down there have been better trained on how to put in for these kinds of things, more so than a lot of the businesses on the northern end. I was just wondering if we could if we could help them with, or do some kind of training with people on the northern end to try to make it where they would, I mean, when you only get 1 out of the northern end and 6 out of the southern end, it means that we're not as well educated on the northern end on how to get grants.
or the word hasn't gotten out as well.
Right, we have to do something.
So what's the solution around that?
Yeah, so.
Because it's
that's
a continuous conversation.
continuous conversation. So I'm open to suggestions. I have a couple of thoughts about this. So the one is that over the last 6 months, our ability to get the word out has increased many-fold compared to what it certainly was when the county originally went out for applications. And so from a traditional just getting the marketing, whether it's through email or social media and those kind of things, our ability a year ago and even 6 months ago was non-existent compared to what it is now. It's something that we knew we needed to do better, and the pandemic actually brought that into hyper focus, where we made some really good progress on knowing the businesses that are in the county, having a good list of emails, and I go on all day, but we're a lot better situation now to get the word out by ourselves than we were previously. In the past, we get the word out to the chambers of commerce or the community development directors in Saranac Lake and Tupper Lake, and they would do their thing. So we were somewhat dependent on that. And what that means is that when you give it to them, they might do a great job, they might do an okay job, and that's what you get. So I'm confident that we'll be able to get the word out in more traditional ways better moving forward. Number 2, though, which I think, which is probably as important, if not more important, is doing more in, we have to be a little bit careful of this right now with the pandemic, but doing more face-to-face, boots on the ground outreach in the communities. Which, again, I'm not going to fault Russ, but it's a one-man show, going to 19 towns and villages trying to get the word out about something. But in the future, I think what we would like to do, and I've gotten feedback from on this also, is really do more direct outreach. So we could work with Ray, for example, and really just do hyper-focused outreach on his district, or in the town of Chateauguay, or the town of Belmont, and say, hey, do you know your district best? Or a town supervisor and say, do you know your town best? Here's a potential program and we're really trying to get the word out of it. Is there a list of 5 people you know who might be good for it? Let's get together and really walk through it. And then that can get to what you brought up, Don, which I think is a really good point. Some of this might be just a being used to it thing and a training thing where there's more of an understanding and infrastructure in Saranac Lake, for example,
Definitely.
where people feel that they can, something will come up, and then if they put in some effort, it'll mean something, like they'll get. And that may not be the same up here.
But they probably have economic development people in their own,
They do.
and.
They do, and
And where the rest of the county does.
and they hold their hands, right? And we can't do that,
No.
because then it's unfair. I mean, there could be we can't do that as much. So, but still, if I think we could, if we do more direct outreach, boots on the ground in the communities, and we're directly connected to people so that they know that we are real people and that we're generally concerned about them successfully applying for a loan or a grant opportunity. And that there's really, like, this isn't just already decided, that they really do have a legit shot. We're hoping those 2 things can help us, especially. Quite frankly, when I saw the original list of applicants for all of the applicants for microenterprise, I was like, the end result here, just out of probability, is that the southern end communities were gonna have more awards.
Really? Because there were a lot of
There
other
were.
applications that didn't get
Where?
moved on.
I think that's part of the education now, that we
Right.
need to, there might have been 1 or 2 words, if they would change those around, they might have been okay with it. But I think that's where we need to help them a little more.
So that sounds like an approach where in a meeting with about 6 people, you could do it in person, socially distanced, and set up relationships. That sounds like a great idea.
Relationship, I think.
There's also nothing stopping you, because you talked a little bit about conflict, right? You had to be careful. But if you ran some kind of group training and walking them through the application process and what was needed, that everybody could participate in, then there is no one-on-one there or the perception of
That's
favoritism.
a really good point.
And this is legislating the stress to the businesses that they need to come to that training or be part of that training.
And I do want to mention that training is part of the program, and we did do extensive technical assistance to each of the grantees. I spent a lot of time working with each of them on their application, and so did Jim Batcher from CT Mail. So we did do extensive support for anybody who did apply.
So all 20 of those applications.
We offer certainly support, but the program is not a very broad program. It has very, very specific requirements, and it's easy to get disqualified. If you don't meet specific income requirements or project requirements, like we couldn't do anything that had construction, and that actually would apply to some of the Chateauguay businesses. There were 3 out of those 4 ended up just not being eligible based on the program criteria, or they withdrew their application because they ended up going a different direction.
So
So
it's
there was only
structured.
one project in Chateauguay that wasn't approved based upon the actual project itself.
So maybe based on that understanding, you might have alternative ideas in terms of what other programs could meet some of those needs for these folks who are trying to kick off a business.
And we did refer people to AEDC, our loan, if there were other needs around that project, they were made available to the applicants.
It's also an issue that, the people that we helped put the application, but all the businesses that didn't put an application.
Right.
That should be a target, because that's
That's
where
right.
we missed the boat.
Right.
And they have to look for the opportunities also.
Absolutely.
Because I know we did
It's a
one in the
two-way
village
street.
of Malone, and we begged people to put their application in. Yeah, several of us at the village board and Jeremy's board went back and forth and said, submit to the technical grant, submit to the, and we brought them application after application. So you have to want to help your business more with all these opportunities that are coming forward.
But all I'm saying is, sometimes there's one little thing that if they just change their wording in their business plan, it could make a difference between getting the grant and not getting the grant a lot of times.
And we did want those projects to be successful with getting.
So I think this is a good bridge to where we go next with microenterprise. Back to your point, Lindy, as something that we talk about as a priority, we would like to have microenterprise as a placeholder in anticipation that another round will be coming. Because again, it's federal, it is a good distinction. These are federal funds that are they're really not affected by the state's budget situation. And so there's every expectation that there will be a round that comes again. And it's one of the few grant opportunities out there for very small businesses, right? So what we're always seeing are grants to the larger projects, and you have so many small businesses that fall through the cracks. This is one of the few that exist, and it's an administrative nightmare, but for the businesses that we are able to help, and I think the town of Malone's, they did theirs at the same time. You know, there's good projects. They're able to do some good stuff for these folks, and so keeping it as a placeholder and preparing for and being ready for when it comes out again, I think, or we think, should be something on our priority list. And then when it does come, we put into practice some of these improvements that we talked about on how to get the word out better and help people submit better applications. Because one of the things we're going to want to do is show the interest. So when you apply, we want to get interest from people. We get like letters of interest and things, because then we show the need.
When is the next application due?
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know.
And it could be some similar to this, as one of the packages coming out.
Oh, it already was. Yeah, in the CARES Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was already funds dedicated to CDBG,
To existing businesses.
to go down through the CDBG program. And the state has to come up with its own program with those funds and put it out there. So we anticipate it, I just don't know when.
So what you're suggesting is that for one of our priorities, that we have the microenterprise grant, even when this one is finished, because when a new round comes up, you will take the lead in the application for Franklin County to get the microenterprise grant.
And between the things we just talked about as far as getting the word out, and the work that Russ has made in establishing the program, because it's not like they give you application form, they don't give you much of anything. And you have to create it all. And it's now all
No, you
created.
have it.
It's all there, ready to
You're
go.
one step ahead.
The amount of work that he's put in on that side is truly remarkable. Let's be all ready and go after it this next time in the role. And I think the need will be there.
And you expect it possibly in the next 6 months?
I would think so, because I'm sure the federal government wants to see those funds put out there. So I'm sure the pressure is on the state to get it out.
Excuse me, Russ, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I was going to just say that, we were doing outreach while we were concurrently building the program guidelines and the application, developing the grant committee. So we have all those things in place now that we're not going to have to do concurrently while we're trying to do outreach at the same time.
I think we want to review the grant committee as well, and have the legislature more active part in that, moving forward.
Okay, anyone move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Next one is the electric vehicle charging station. As you recall, there is one charging station now here at the courthouse, but there's also another one that's we're working on getting installed, right, Russ? You wanna
Correct.
just give everybody an update on that?
Nice, sir.
Yeah, and I started in NYPA, National Grid are all working together to help provide us with a DC fast charging station. We'll be down here on the side of the parking lot along Hamston. It's a pretty significant investment on their part. I mean, they're providing basically a $50,000 charging station with all the labor and the transformer and everything that they need to provide power to it. So it's a nice gift from them to be providing that, and we really don't have to do much on our end. There's no reimbursements. We're not putting out any money for that. So that's,
We don't get any great for it either.
right, it's just it's basically provided. to us.
Providing a service to the area.
Right.
So this is a project that is now, we can more or less check off the list, like it doesn't need to stay here. So we can, you know,
It's all
just,
very handy.
it'll just work itself through and
Right.
we just move on to something else.
They worked with our building and grounds department.
Good.
Right now, we're currently on if we need to get a building permit for it, that's the next step right now, but all the site design, it's all been completed, so that's our next step.
From a tourism standpoint, being able to get this prominence in terms of visibility, that it exists and is on maps. That's
Yes.
Yes, it's on the ads. Okay, number 3 is the countywide resiliency plan grant. At the time that we put this list together, there was a grant that Russ had applied for, and I think everyone was hoping that it would be received, but in the end, it was not received. So that's another one to check off the list.
Right, I mean, that's been off the list for a couple of years.
Right.
2020 census, we're in the middle of the counting of the census. The pandemic, as you know, pushed back the time, both on when it had to be completed, but also when we had the census workers out in person. And so that's ongoing. Russ, I mean, so just as a little background, the state had put together a grant program to give to counties to help them with outreach. Basically marketing, hey, go complete the census, the council clerks. And we had been working, Russ, myself, and Don have been working on, we put in the application for that.
They were
Yeah.
practically guaranteeing it, right?
Practically guaranteeing it, right? And how much was it?
Over $130,000.
Yeah. So we did a budget and everything and got it in. It said you are eligible for this amount of money,
We
so
were
we,
basically awarded, we went to Albany for the conference that we had to attend for it, so we put a lot of work into that.
so there you have it.
And,
And the pandemic hit.
and the guarantee is no longer a guarantee, and there's no, I mean, at this point, it's just not a thing.
So it's more or less just
There's no indication
administration
that
right now.
funding will be available at all.
So it's more or less just administration, and the Census Bureau has put out people that go around and help find
Right.
that also, right?
And we've worked together to put together a complete count committee for the county, and that we've been meeting monthly. And John from United Way and Lee Rivers have been very helpful in taking leadership on coordinating the count committee. We're still very much involved in trying to identify ideas and strategies. We just had a call this week where we focused on targeting the Amish community and continued outreach to seniors. We really hope that we would be able to use dinners and activities at the senior center to work in person with seniors, because we're telling seniors all the time, don't answer the phone and give out personal information, or don't go on the internet and give out your personal information. And so it's a different strategy to try to help them feel comfortable that this is a safe thing to report to. And so we're coming up, working with Michelle Green here to come up with some ideas for how we continue to do outreach. So we're going to continue to put some flyers in with their Meals on Wheels. When they do their outreach to their check-ins, they're going to mention, hey, have you filled out your form yet?
And we're doing it with like the town supervisors and things also.
Yes, and every week I'm putting out an update on our response rates to our stakeholders so that they can see where our progress is.
So with the milk, dairy, produce giveaways that are going to be occurring in Tupper Lake, I think it's this weekend, and then in Saranac Lake on August 22nd, we get a lot of people driving through. 600 different families are supported by these, and they tend to be people who are, maybe 2/3 of them are in need. So that's a place where you have folks who are sitting in their cars, stationary, and willing to talk to you for a period of time. So we've been having registrations for voting and people come for cancer screening discussions, and so you could come and do a census, or have people come and do census there.
What's the date for the second?
Tupper Lake one, Paul?
August 8th.
It's the 8th,
August 8th.
August 8th.
I can certainly talk to our census contacts to see, because we can't really like take a tablet and do it for them, but the census workers can, so I can
Right.
invite them.
Good
and ask
idea.
if they could
Right.
go.
Or,
Yeah.
or is there a paper?
There really isn't.
So Franklin County is 52 out of 62 counties in terms of census right now. We are down at the bottom, or pretty dang close, and we only have 48.4% of our people counted.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that we are very highly impacted by seasonal homes, and if seasonal homeowners are not filling out for their address, their second property address, then it's not going to show in our response rate. So like Santa Clara has a very low response rate, but we also have a very high percentage of second homes there. So that's throwing our numbers off. And they are planning on doing more of the door-to-door outreach in the next month. And I think they're doing some email and direct outreach now, but that will start to
It's
self-correct.
great that you're doing the Amish community, because I know like in the Mount area, there's 35 Amish families, and there's 8 or 10 in every family, so
Right.
it adds up fast. And Warren has them, Chattagay, or Constable, Burke areas.
I know that the United Way and Cornell Extension and some of our other partners are working together to use the auctions and the other places where they do make contact to encourage them to fill those out. And we've also talked yesterday about having an event, or trying to identify an event where there would be a high level of Amish participation, that we would be able to have a census worker there. Because the more people with that, and we can kind of appeal to them by saying, if you fill this out here and now, then we won't knock on your door. You know, but we also really feel the elders should be part of that
Well, I
conversation.
think if the elders
That's the
are
second-
buy in,
that's the next
the rest of the family does, you know.
Right.
Okay, so that's something that will continue to be a priority until the count is done. We'll
Where's the map?
keep working on it. Any questions on that? So the next one was broadband, and this is something that has been a big priority for the legislature. Our role has been wanting to just be supportive on whatever priorities or data or information, whatever we can do to be helpful. And what my suggestion with this priority is that it not be specifically identified, because just so that you guys know that we will be partners. I mean, what you need related to broadband. I mean, Russ has forgotten more than most will ever know about it as far as Franklin County, and it would be a resource as it continues to be something that, I mean, if we want to keep it as a listed priority, that's fine, but I don't feel we need to. And if we take it off, it doesn't mean we're not going to be helpful or a partner with it.
You said be part of you.
Yeah,
Part of the LDC or the
it's-
ID or
it's-
anywhere
it's
else.
critical economic development infrastructure, so.
And we continue to participate. There's a monthly broadband call that Dave Wolf is still organizing, and we continue to participate in that and ask questions about progress on Franklin County projects. And we continue to be part of that.
Yeah, 'cause that's always going to be a priority, I mean, no matter what.
Is there any progress on that?
They're waiting on Make Ready again in Mobile National Grid.
We're gonna wait.
But we also would appreciate advocacy around the tax on broadband on the public highways. There's a tax being instituted on broadband, specifically new broadband being placed along public highways. SLIC has been advocating, bringing awareness to that other providers are not required to pay. Some existing providers are not.
Like National Grid and Verizon are being required to pay that.
And so, and they're just showing the amount of taxes that they're being required to pay makes it even more prohibitive to try to reach some of these hard to reach areas. So that's something that I could give you some more information about.
Yeah, there's something maybe we should have, the more they read, they're trying to help that way.
Oh, yeah, you should see it in my campus like this.
That's gonna be a pretty big issue with schools.
Well, especially if they're going from home.
Already is.
Yeah, it's been since we shut COVID down with
Yeah.
COVID and
I know like Bombay put one at their municipal building and one at their park.
I wish we could.
Last time.
I could still get my hand and snap through the spectrum.
Pretty reliable.
So you're saying we don't need that on the list, but it'll always be a priority.
Absolutely.
So we start a new list.
Start a new list.
Yeah.
Department of State Occupancy Enhancement Grants. This is the partnership with, was a shared services grant for the Department of State. Included Essex County, and the purpose was to allow the counties to get the occupancy tax collection software, the host compliance software, and have by demonstrating that the level of registrations and enforcements goes up, then the shared services grant would reimburse the cost of that software. Russ, where is that today?
So I just had a call this morning with Essex County. I think that, well, just to back up a little bit. So as Jerry mentioned with the grant, the goal of the grant was to implement the software and then show results in improving our enforcement in Franklin County and Essex County, both in the number of registrations and also the amount collected, which we have seen significant increase in both counties. That does, I think, align with the deliverables that we presented. Hamilton County doesn't have an occupancy tax, so their objective was to get it in place and start to find ways to utilize it to increase their inventory, because they're not as concerned about competition from short-term rentals. They actually need more inventory for events and things like that. So they're gonna work with their chambers of commerce to help integrate their inventory into some of their planning. So they've, at this point, I feel that all the counties have completed their deliverables. I've sent that to our contact at DOS to say what other reporting is necessary before we can apply for reimbursement. So I'm waiting on word on that. I sent that out a couple of days ago. So hopefully I'll hear back on that soon. And then as soon as we feel confident that we've done what we need to do to get reimbursed, that there aren't going to be any hiccups, then I will, reach out and work with Donna and Fran to take the next steps for the financial reimbursement.
Right, because what we had to do is technically Bruce, when they were under contract, they have paid the initial cost, since it was a tri-county project. So $55,000, which is the first payment, we would need to pay Bruce and then invoice for reimbursement back to the DOS.
That's why Russ is making sure that everything,
That's right.
paperwork is in order, and that there's not going to be any hiccups before you actually
Right.
make that payment.
So who actually has the software? We do, or?
Yes.
Everyone, all three counties.
Okay, so we actually have it, so it's
Yeah.
ours.
Yep.
Right, it's ours as long as we continue to annually pay. And one of the issues is to make sure that if, say, we didn't get the grant and we used the software, right? Because we started this
We'd have to pay for it.
June of 2018.
18, so Franklin County can't just be responsible for the full payment. It has to be prorated, $55,000 a year, prorated to two other counties based on the number of registrants that they have, right? So,
We have been approved for additional funding beyond the
Right.
initial payment, so we're hoping that if we show that this was effective, we'll apply for another year of funding for the software. We will have to come up with, as Dennis said, a long-term.
What was the year for the funding? What was the year for the first one? 18?
June 2018 to June 2019.
So
So
now we're in
we're a
year
year
two.
out of access to the software that we haven't paid for, and the company's been very generous in allowing us to continue forward with the promise that, if we get the grant funding, we'll reimburse them. So it's time is of the essence in us getting this done so that we can apply for a second reimbursement for the second year, and continue moving forward with it. All the counties have indicated it's been very helpful in having that information to increase enforcement.
This is another one that just needs to get all approved, completed.
Right.
It doesn't need to be on here anymore. It's not like we're just gonna give up on it. But I would say there's other things we can talk about, and this is just one of those things that gets done. The last one is the Energize New York. That's the PACE financing program. And if you recall, the county, and at the time it wasn't approved, but the county has since approved being able for businesses that are doing commercial renovations and want to get good financing for energy improvements.
All the energy.
So that was that's in place now, and Russ does get calls on occasion about how it might be useful to somebody. I'm not sure we've had anybody take advantage of it yet.
We've had interest in it. The challenge is that their main mortgage holder has to subvert to the PACE program, so they have to take a second.
More than that, just them saying they want to do it.
Yeah, and that's, but there are providers that specialize in PACE financing that are willing to do that, so there are options if the project is.
And is that a matching funds or is that?
No, it's a form of financing.
Oh, it's a loan.
Yep.
So again, this is.
Remember, and it went to, we were concerned about the risk to the county, but then they changed the program.
Right.
And it really wiped out our risk
Correct.
to do this.
We got nothing to lose by doing it.
We had nothing to lose.
So they come first over the mortgage company?
Correct.
So if you don't, okay. Can you send me that information?
Sure.
Just for,
Good.
a couple of properties, and I'd like to see if I can get them interested.
So basically, we kept the micro enterprise grant as one that you're really for
This
projects
is another
today.
one that doesn't need to be on here.
What's
The
that?
Energize one.
Right, that doesn't need to be on
That's just,
anymore.
you know,
Right.
if someone, that's a tool that you guys put in place, right? So, which I think at some point will be useful to somebody. So that's just something that we will provide technical assistance for. If somebody's interested, tell them about it. It doesn't need to be a specific project identified on here.
So the micro enterprise, so the micro enterprise grant would be one of the goals to have as a placeholder
Yes,
for the next 6 months or the next
Right.
year.
Five
Right.
priorities.
which gets to you know, the next question, like, so what's next? And we look forward to hearing from your your thoughts about it, but there's a couple of things that we've had on our list that I'd like to go over. One of these was in response to Donna's request about what we're working on in the loan, or making the loan revitalization a priority. So there's two priorities that we would put forth that are really important to us. The timing is right for, and then happy to have a discussion about those and other ideas that you all have. So first of all, related to, if you recall, we have the CAI report, the business cluster analysis done, I think in 2018. And so what we've been wanting to do is put focus into the first recommendations from that report. We've spent time looking at it, we've spent time thinking about how we can implement some of the goals from it, but we haven't really gotten deep into it. But that was a goal from us at the beginning of the year. Specifically, for a lot of Russ's time focused on it, which then by the time March came around, we had to shift just like everybody. And, you know, since March, it was more emergency technical assistance, establishing our emergency loan fund. But now that we're kind of getting a little bit settled, what we want to do is get back into this. So just I don't want to go into details right now, unless you want to, but the first recommendations from the report were related to creating communications plan, both for, this is for business attraction, both for the cluster, the supporting industries that were identified in the report, but also on occupations, like what jobs, what occupations do we stand in need of that we can't fill? And to do a communications strategy around both of those. Those were the first two recommendations from the report. And, you know, I say this in seriousness. As an organization, we have not been set up as an effective communications organization. We just haven't. That's the way it is. It's a deficiency that we recognize and put on our list to address, but we just haven't been able to make a lot of headway. And when we started looking closely at this, how do we implement these recommendations, it was clear that our deficiencies were reinforced. So, you know, on our priority list for this year was to address that. And we've been making really good progress in that regard. I mentioned our abilities as far as communications earlier, that were non-existent a year ago. And we will be continuing with those efforts. We have work to do, but we're making headway.
Specifically, you've been actively pursuing identifying business owners and contact information. So you've been creating a list of contact information, right?
Right, which we didn't have in any structured format. We do now.
Right.
And it needs to be constantly worked on because things change. But
Right.
yes.
So the communication part of that is so that, like, if I own a business and I can't get something or I need something, I need to find out what we can do to help out to bring that to this area or whatever. Right?
Yeah, and there's it's a two-way communication, right? So we need to be able to get the word out to those people that we know about specifically by email or whatever. But also people need to be able to find us to know that, like, to ask for information, get data, or understand about Franklin County. And we've been deficient in both of those regards. So we've been making a lot of progress on that direct outreach, knowing the businesses that exist in Franklin County. But one of the things that we are focused on for the remainder of the year, and it'll go into next year, is on our web presence, basically our website, which you can't even, right now with our website, franklin98.org, you can't look at it on your phone, which is, that's a dinosaur, right? So we've known we needed to make some upgrades to it, and so we've just started that effort in identifying the process and the consultant to help us really get a web presence that's worthy of what we're trying to accomplish with it.
So, but as far as that feels like it's an internal, goal of yours, right? That's a priority for you, for the IDA and LDC. But as far as a direct focus of our 5 priorities, so I understand why you're saying once you get that set up, but where does that bring us to the next step as far as assisting with Malone revitalization?
Oh, that's a different priority. I was going to do the Malone next.
Oh, so, but that priority is for your internal agency, that's your priority, right?
Our priority is to be able
To increase your
do the
communication.
communications plan from the report that
Right,
in our view is a priority for all of us.
Maybe when after he talks about Malone revitalization, we can talk about how a listing of businesses could lead into another goal.
I'm just a little bit confused about the direction we've taken.
Yeah, you started the conversation by saying Malone revitalization, and then you said we've been working on communication, so you stepped away from it.
Right.
I wanted to introduce two different potential priorities. One is communications related to the CAI report. The other one was downtown. Sorry if I confused the two.
Well, I just wanted to just comment that this is a priority that the legislature has had ever since we did the CAI study, was to identify at least one thing out of the study that we wanted to take action on. So that's what Jeremy's referring to, and the communications plan is a specific recommendation from the study. And one of the things we commissioned in the study was to identify specific messaging and data points that would be relevant and important to the site selectors that we wanted to reach. And so the website is going to be a key tool for us to be able to present that data and that messaging in a way that's really relevant, really efficient, really effective at connecting with site selectors, which is what we wanted to get out of the CAI study, was to say, what's going to be the most relevant to our target audience? How do we put that front and center, easy to get to, visually attractive? Because site selectors are going to be going to our website, and one of the things we've talked about for the last couple of years is getting our harbor ready. Because what's the use in trying to go out and get the ship to come in if our harbor isn't really ready to accept them? And so this website is part of the harbor development of having a place for these site selectors to go. Over 65% of site selectors start with a website. So we want to make sure that that's a really good experience for them and leads to further conversation down the road.
So it relates to recruiting new businesses. I haven't talked to them
Right.
about this at all, but
Right.
But it relates specifically to integrating the CAI study as a priority, if that's something the county wants to indicate.
So, any questions with that, or then we can talk about Malone revitalization?
I'd like to come back to it after Malone revitalization.
Okay. So Malone revitalization, downtown Malone specifically, downtown revitalization for Malone, has been on our list for our own list for a couple of years, along with the village of Malone. And we've had some pretty specific objectives that we wanted to accomplish, and we're just getting going on a couple of them. So what we originally identified was to do a New York State Main Street Program technical assistance grant. And we applied for that in last year. We applied for it, 2019, with the village, and we received it. It's for $20,000, and that has two purposes. One is to develop design guidelines for how building facades can get renovated in a way that's historically sensitive to the building and to downtown Malone. And the other part is to do facade feasibility studies for several buildings, where an architect comes in and you see what it is today, and then they do a rendering of what it could look like renovated in a historically accurate way. And so we, a couple months ago, identified the architect, and this is what Andrea was referring to. We've been working for the last couple of months trying to get, see what interest we could get from owners downtown who would want to have their building be one of the studies that was done, because we're going to do 6 of them, I think. And
$20,000 will do that?
what?
Will $20,000 do that?
$20,000 does that and the design guidelines. Yeah, $21,000. Yeah. So we actually just had a meeting with the architect just a couple of days ago. Had a nice walk through town so that they could orient themselves with Andrea and Matt Boyer, and it was fun. It was good to get his perspective as an outsider and what he saw. He wanted to kind of get, I don't know, Andrea, do you want to say anything about it? I mean, you were there.
Yeah, it's nice to bring, actually, he's the mayor.
He
He's
is
an
the mayor,
architect,
right.
he's the mayor of Village of Perry. And, we tried to show him what potential projects that we have in the forecast coming forward, what could be done. So he was really interested in Citizen Advocates Project. our, potential projects at the River Building and what was going on with the River Building, and further down the street, if there's other potential building remodeling going on. And then just the backstory of everything, of all the buildings and how it's changed over the years. So it was a interesting walkabout, showing him what we're looking at, what we're trying to accomplish for the village with our growth and economic development. So the IDA, or the group that's working with Russ and Jeremy, picked the buildings after all the applications, which we have 6 of them we've identified. We had 5, and we added 1 more to the group to do, because where they fall in the stretch of Main Street. So it's going to be exciting to see. He gave us some drawings and some photos of some things that he's done before in other places. And then some of it looks like simple work with color, lighting, signage, and, the fake facade up in the top parts of the building. So it's going to be interesting to see what he comes back at, and working with the historical district of downtown.
So Russ, you did some work on this a few years ago. You had a whole file, right? And you had drawings and different things. What happened with that?
We've incorporated some of that into
Okay,
this.
because that was well before 19.
Right.
And we applied for a grant, right? Did we work with Melissa McManus or something
Yeah.
on that?
Which,
That was the one
Yeah,
for downtown with Melissa, that never
yeah,
materialized.
20, well, I'm not sure.
That was never awarded, right?
So that, we can move on to that. So that's the next pieces. Once we get this work done, which is in this calendar year, Malone will be better set up for applying for a New York Main Street regular facade grant, like the one that we are doing right now in Tupper Lake and Saranac Lake. It's a matching grant program where owners can get money to get the facades fixed up or commercial spaces renovated. We're doing that in Tupper Lake and Saranac Lake right now. This is a good step for helping Malone be able to do that. And both of the parts of this project are almost required in order to be competitive for a matching grant program. One of the first questions on the application is what are the design guidelines that you're going to follow for the renovations? Well, if you can't answer, if your answer is we don't have design guidelines, then that makes you basically ineligible. So from this project, Malone will have design guidelines specific to its community, which then it can refer to when you apply for a renovation grant. We plan to do that this year, but that's not going to happen because there's not a program right now. We'll see when the state's economic development programs come out again. But the goal is to have this stuff completed and then use that to build on another application.
So we're backtracking more or less because we couldn't do it, now we're gonna do the right steps so we can do it.
Correct. These are building blocks. There's all sorts of building blocks for successful downtown revitalization. And the consultant had this big fancy chart that shows, in his experience, how this stuff pieces together. We're actually working on several of these pieces right now. Before Lindy.
No, go ahead, keep
So
going.
the next part, the other 2 parts of this that we've been talking to the village about over the last couple of years is related to some existing local waterfront program funds that were awarded to the region. Without going into too much detail, there was state waterfront funds awarded to the region. And it wasn't specifically, there were potential projects identified in the application, but it wasn't awarded to specific projects. That was to come afterwards. So I think that's what Russ was referring to a couple of years ago when the regional waterfront committee was trying to identify the specific projects that would get funding. We pointed a couple of different things to downtown Malone. One of them is, there were two, and there's been a lot of waiting because of just the grant contract process. But the two parts that we wanted to do was a revitalization strategy, which is more of the, whether the specific economic development activities for downtown and strategies for downtown Malone that the village and the community want to undertake. It's more of the policies and incentives, whatever that might be, that is specific to downtown Malone. And that is going to be funded through this stuff takes forever. This is a 2016 waterfront grant that is finally ready for us to get going with it. So Andrea and I have been talking about it now with Melissa for like 2 years. And it's finally ready to go. So we're going to be helping the village kind of undertake that whole process. And there's a match requirement, but we'll be able, that's not a big deal. We'll work through that. And at the end, there should be an actual downtown Malone revitalization strategy that builds upon best practices, but also a lot of the work that's been done in the past. You know, all the plans on the shelf. The stuff that's still relevant will get pulled out and added to it. The other one that we were working on was another waterfront grant was a downtown physical enhancement plan. So the Main Street program is focused on that we were talking about before, is focused on private buildings. This is focused on the public infrastructure, the parks, the sidewalks, the streetscape, things like that. And this was I was just overhearing Andrea and talking the other day about light poles and challenges with light poles downtown, and the desire to have consistent functioning light poles. But you gotta have you can tie this all, identify these needs and tie it all together in a physical plan for the public infrastructure downtown. So if this all works out the way we've been hoping and planning, within a couple of years, downtown Malone will have the overarching strategy for how it wants, what its vision, how it wants to move forward, a plan for the physical improvements on the public infrastructure side, and also hopefully we'll be doing a facade grant for private buildings. So that's some of the stuff we've been working on for the last, just kind of the planning stages for the last couple of years. It's on our priority list for 2020. It's going to continue because it's not a one-year thing, but
You're a step closer than you were before.
we keep getting one step at a time. So those are the specific priorities for downtown Malone. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've got them all.
So there's a number of things that are going on. Yeah.
They take.
There's so many moving parts to what everybody's working towards. There's so many organizations and groups that are working on this corridor of Main Street that putting everybody together between our lights and our street with New York State DOT and traffic plans and patterns and walkable communities and upgrades to buildings and purchasing of buildings and selling of buildings and maintaining the infrastructure underneath the road. And who would have thought that like the lights, who would have thought that the 39 lights the village owns on Main Street is such an important issue with finding the right design to go on Main Street, because what we've been finding right now are not what would really work with what we have or what we want for Main Street.
What you have now is nice lights.
They are, but they're very difficult to maintain. They're a park light. They're not a four-way. They're not a highway light. We have a highway that goes through Main Street, and the lights don't shine far enough over the 4 lanes. And then to get the 4 lanes and then the sidewalks, it's been difficult to find the right light to go and replace on Main Street. And then they're burning out quicker because they're 20-some years old. So, a lot of things to, John,
Oh, we know all that stuff is going on either, that's, and then there's grants for that, and that sort of
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
also,
So,
Those were the, are there other priorities that we want to talk about today?
before you do that, was there anything else on Malone revitalization? So having Malone revitalization as a goal sounds appropriate.
I mean,
between the, the IDA and the economic development and then the Malone Transformation Group and the Malone Revitalization Group and the village, the town and,
all your factories and things.
county, yeah.
Warehouses and whatever.
So, there was a request to talk about potential new goals. Ed, how would you like to go about doing that?
I hear what you said.
request for new goals, so there's, how many priorities right now are open based on,
Did we identify a certain number?
we did 5 a year.
It actually
Like
says
5, and then I think that, some have carried over, right, because they weren't done, so, but right now, I feel like there might be 4, based on the list you went through, there might be 4 openings.
So, do you want us to throw out ideas?
Well, if there are openings in the new legislature, should obviously put their ideas out and so we can get it to everybody and see what direction everybody wants to move forward. I think to be fair to every district,
Right.
I would think, unless somebody else has any ideas about it. I mean, maybe not put everybody on the spot right now, but to think about it and get those ideas, compile them, and
Okay.
we can talk about it at the next meeting.
Yeah, I report that it's kind of low hanging fruit that we could take out of that and use, and just try to put it into effect now, because I know it was quite a report, I don't have the report right in front of me, I don't remember all that.
Well, the agricultural tourism, right, was,
Well, that's the really cluster.
yeah.
And I know there was some things about alcohol, aluminum, and our aluminum products or something like that at one time.
Right, but I think where we should revisit that, but I think where we came about looking through the whole thing back and forth was, man, I mean, looking to be a place to, is it stage 2, is that what it's called, stage 2 aluminum processing? We don't have the information, we don't have the data and the infrastructure to even go out and seriously sell our community yet.
You mean the electrical capacity?
Well, we have electrical capacity, but we don't know enough about the availability, where the substations are. I mean, there's a lot of parts to actually going to someone and saying,
Or that you don't have the infrastructure map basically around that.
yeah, we have all sorts of parts. Here.
Yes, but you
Right,
don't
but
have it.
it's not cohesive yet in a way that we can market.
So the 5 important local clusters that they identified was agriculture and food processing. And remember, Don, there was a whole attempt on, I believe, like a meat cutting facility, right? Russ was involved in that. Environmental science and biotechnology, forestry and wood products, healthcare and wellness, and tourism, culture, and recreation. Those were the 5 clusters identified in this report.
From the CAI.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, what they did was they took the 5 priority industries from the SEDS that was done in 2016 and did a deeper dive into the, as far as real, like, they went another level of detail on occupations that are needed for those, where in the county, which one was stronger.
I think they were saying the Plattsburgh area was gonna grow with some of the things that they had there, and that we would be a good potential area to do some of the overflow that comes beyond that area.
Yeah.
And we have to transport people there to work now, so I think maybe some of the things that are being done there, maybe could be done similar here or something.
Yeah, that's one of the opportunities that, I've been interested in with the Chateauguay Industrial Park, because from a distance standpoint, it's, you know,
Not that far away down the road.
right on Route 11, it's not that far away from Plattsburgh, and it seemed to be a logical place for that type of secondary or supplier type industry to show up. So, again, that's one of those things where we have information about it, about the park, and because it's a shovel-ready park. And we've actually responded to requests for information that come through Empire State Development. What happens is that when a site selector has a big project that they're looking at doing, they'll oftentimes start with Empire State Development and give a spreadsheet and say, this is what we're looking for. And then the state passes that down to the county IDAs. And then any county that has that type of building or property available, we then respond back with the specifics of that. And we've done that a few times. There haven't been any in a while, but in most cases, we've given them Chateauguay. A lot of times they're looking for buildings, and we don't have buildings that meet the specifications, but sometimes it's land. We have most of the information we need to respond to those for Chateauguay. But we don't have it, so in that kind of response, we're in good shape. But we don't have the ability to take that information and share it out on our own. And that is, again, that's why we are working on developing our ability to communicate and having this stuff more readily available on the website that functions better.
No, some of the business, like the old Yando's IGA, could that be developed into something, would that fit within the criteria? Or there's other buildings that are empty all over the place, I mean, it's.
Usually the requests are much bigger, like 80,000, 120,000 square feet. I mean, but when they're appropriate, when we have something that seems to fit, we send it.
Yeah, I didn't know if they were on your list of things to send to them.
Yando's?
Yeah.
Oh, that's-
I'm just saying, Nando's is one, and I think I forgot that, we have a drugstore up here that's empty, and we have.
So I had wanted to go back to the idea of communications and what you've been building out in terms of businesses and contact information. Did I interrupt you?
No, I interrupted you.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that. So, and this is around the CAI, you were saying, how can we use it? One of the potential goals we could have is recruit a new business with the goal of having one new business per district. And just say, we're going to recruit, whether it's a big business or a small business, work on recruiting businesses for each of the district. And there could be different ways of recruiting businesses or retaining businesses. For example, there could be telecommuting businesses that are recruited that could be placed in almost any place, or there could be a strategy of taking existing businesses and looking at them from where they are in their place relative to maturity. How soon is that business owner going to move towards retirement? And how do we move them to a retention plan of retaining the business? I know that there are other partners who are working on this. We could work in partnership with them. And we could also think about encouraging entrepreneurship. And each district might have a different approach. The one district might be looking more towards telecommuting, or another turnover of existing businesses, and another of growing new business owners, and what are the opportunities. So But that, the bedrock of that is understanding what the existing businesses are and being able to communicate about what assets could be utilized for those business owners. So that's where I would link it back to. I think this could be a goal for Franklin County that takes advantage of what CAI was talking about in terms of having a communication plan.
Jeremy, you come down to the Fort Collins, there's going to be a soybean processing plant in Messina or St. Lawrence County, and things weren't going good or whatever. You and Russ come down, looked at a couple of places in Fort Collins, and three of the things was power, state highway, and possibly the railroad. Okay. What was the deciding factor them not choosing Franklin County and staying or finally moving ahead with St. Lawrence County? You know what?
I only know what they told me from the beginning, which was that they wanted to be in Messina, and I think a lot of that had to do with electricity.
Low cost.
Right, and but at some point they were having some challenges finding a suitable location, so they were starting to look up our way. And I guess and then they did end up not too long ago finally settling on a place in Messina. What I learned from that though was that there are some up in Fort Covington, there's some advantages to several properties for the reasons that you laid out that we need to have on our radar, because I don't think anyone's thought about before, just because of the confluence of available infrastructure, which isn't there in every community.
I thought the CIA report, I thought one aspect that was left out that as far as bringing in industry, bringing in anything would be critical was the railroad coming in from Canada and going through, and you had a spur in Fort Covington, and I thought it was, how did they miss that? I mean, why wasn't that an important aspect, having a spur so close to the border? I mean, that's something we can keep in the back of our minds when we're, something comes along, that there is a spur that,
Well, so
the only one in Franklin County.
not even back of mind. I mean, when I first got here, I had no idea there was a spur there already. Yeah. And then it was all about looking at the feasibility of a new spur 2.5 miles down the road in Bombay.
They did a study on it. You guys
Did a study on it, right? So
Got all kinds of money, it was all legal.
there's already a spur.
Right,
So
exactly.
on our list, and we need to find the new contact, because there were some changes happening at CSX, and then now it's going to get bought out, is to fully understand that spur and the availability of it and what their goals for it are, to be sure that it is an asset, that there's not something that's missing with it. Because if it is, that changes the dynamics. Like, why would you consider a new spur at $750,000, 2.5 miles down the road, if that one's available right across the border?
And you got access to 150 acres around it.
And water and sewer,
Yeah,
and the state highway.
yeah, and half mile, I mean, by road, you're only half mile from Canada, let alone the railroad track, you're a quarter mile.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Yeah,
Paul-
that affair was never, I don't think that's really a place that was on anyone's radar. But it certainly has been for me ever since we went through that with that company.
Paul?
Yeah.
Paul, does that train run into anywhere near Ogdensburg from when it comes down?
Yeah, it continues on. Yeah, it goes to Messina, then continues right on, yeah.
Because we've talked before when I was with the Seaway years ago, and we've talked about it since with Elise, about doing something from that site to the port of Ogdensburg and shipping materials out and receiving materials from the seaway, which is a great savings to manufacturers and raw producers. Something to think about, Jeremy.
And what was that again, making the connection between the port and the.
Get to the port of Ogdensburg, then you use the St. Lawrence Seaway system to import and export raw materials and manufactured goods.
And I know what Carl was done, he was looking, he figured he'd get a figure on, no, he did on sugar, remember sugar?
Yeah.
Goes to Montreal and then they ship it back to Plattsburgh.
So, there's some specific aspects about having covered areas for transferring materials cleanly for spurs. And you might need to find out what additional requirements would be needed at that spur in order to transfer materials from one car to another if you were doing that.
Yeah, the sugar was a big one though, because they go over there, then they were trucking it to Plattsburgh,
Yeah,
where they just picked up cars off and put them on a truck right there.
But one of the components of the CAI study was looking at what kind of cargo is moving through that corridor, because it goes up to Valley Fields, I think, from there, correct?
It goes through Huntington, yeah, I don't know.
It's a major
I mean, it
corridor.
connects all the other railroads, potentially.
So one of the things we wanted to eventually look at when we had the capacity was, you know, what is some of the cargo that's traveling through, and again, what other opportunities like sugar
What's going into
might
Canada and
exist
coming
to
back,
be
yeah.
able to offload it regionally.
Yeah.
Including, you know, Lindy and I met several times about recycling opportunities, and, you know, what could be coming through here that we could.
And there does seem to be some opportunities around the landfill because of power source, right? There's some opportunities for some wood products, I believe. So that should be discussed.
We're working on the methane gas.
And methane gas, I mean, there's opportunities around the landfill.
Renewable natural gas is something that's definitely
That's right.
on the radar right now, and that's something we.
And I know Liberty is interested in having more discussions around that.
Well, they're talking about doing stuff for the farmers, biodigesters.
It's helpful, but Lindy and I have had a lot of conversations about recycling opportunities, and I think we should continue to pursue that.
so maybe we should have a community-oriented economic goal that might relate around the landfill.
Yeah.
And it's, what are the opportunities? Is it the methane? Is it the biodigester? Is it plastic recycling? You know, what's the
I mean, it's an
first, second, third target, and let's just take on the first one, you know. The other one that comes up off and on is healthcare and childcare. So people keep describing, at least I've been in many conversations recently at our side about, boy, there's lots of people out there, we should be putting them to work because there's a healthcare industry and a lot of elder care is required. And we keep saying back to them, there are private companies that are trying to hire health people to train to become healthcare workers, to get certified, and they can't recruit people. They just can't find them. No one is applying. And there's a great need, and there's already infrastructure in these private companies who will pay people to learn the skills to get certified. But something is keeping us from utilizing people to go into that field. And I don't know if that is a relative goal that matches with what would be important, but healthcare and wellness is one of the major industries in our area. So I wanted to mention that as well. Does anyone else pick up on that in terms of discussion items?
It's a topic that comes up in our workforce development discussions, and I kind of specialize in our workforce development side of things already seeing is conversation that seems to pop up regularly.
Okay.
Everybody's having challenges. Salaries is a big part of the issue. Is some of the, like CNAs, it's kind of, it's a messy, unpleasant job sometimes for very, very low pay. It's difficult.
And childcare is extremely difficult. I mean, you have to be certified, and being certified, you have to go through all these major requirements, and,
A lot of them haven't opened back up yet.
yeah.
And it'll be a big aspect of getting our businesses open.
Does anyone know if that STAR, Andrea, like a few years ago, I met with one of our local daycares who was working on the STAR program. She did. Do you know if that program is still around? There was a program in the state, it was implemented, if you met certain metrics, that you could qualify for some funding.
And it is, and, some of the facilities or, daycare providers find it very difficult to meet all those criteria financially.
Is it cash up front to get reimbursed for those investments?
I think so, it's the certain programs you have to put in place and the space and class time, and that was, I think, one of the biggest times is.
Some are doing it out of their homes, so it's hard to.
Because there was an issue of investment in the infrastructure or the, building, that's something I think we could possibly look at having a program to help with that.
Right.
But,
I know if you talk to one of the bigger childcare providers in the community now that has a building financially struggling, even though they have the demand, it's all the other things that come on top of demand of taking care of. They're having a difficult time.
There's a lot
And
of different
keeping
demands
staff.
on them right now.
We talked about a lot, you should probably,
Traffic.
wrap it up.
Yeah. Hey, this is good though, this is a good conversation.
Discussion.
There's a lot of things we can leave going forward to the future conversation.
But if we start doing this once a month again, I think that's great, and just keep, that way we keep it on top of everything. And something doesn't fall by the wayside because we haven't talked about it. Or if we need to add to it,
Yeah, right.
Thanks for having us.
I think we have to go into executive session, we have some personnel issues to talk